The water did not creep. It punched. Della Harne felt it slam the back of her knees and spin her half sideways before she caught the root. Cold tore straight through her skirt, bit into her thighs, climbed her spine. She locked both arms around the slick knot of oak and held. The current river had jumped its banks without warning, a brown wall full of broken limbs, fence posts, and the hard white flash of limestone chunks tumbling under the surface. She spat grit and river water. The taste was clay and rot. "Hold, damn you," she muttered, not to the tree, but to her own hands. Her fingers had already started to numb. She shifted her grip, hooked her elbow over the root, and dragged one knee up out of the current. The force tried to peel her away again. She leaned forward, pressed her cheek to the bark, and let her weight sink into it until the shaking slowed. Upstream, something heavy cracked. A trunk split, then another. The flood carried the sound like a gunshot. She knew what that meant. The bank was giving way in sections. Whole slices of hillside would slide into the water, and anything standing there would go with it. Her cabin stood above that line, or it had at sunrise. Della forced herself to look. Through the spray and the driving rain, she could make out the gray lip of the bluff and the darker shadow where the waterfall cut through it. The falls had swollen, not a clean ribbon now, but a wide, white sheet hammering down into the churn below. Behind that sheet lay her work, months of cutting, hauling, and fitting logs by hand. A narrow ledge, a low roof, smoke-blackened beams that still held the smell of pine and ash. But if the bluff held, the cabin would hold. If the bluff broke, the river would take everything. She dragged herself higher on the root, then up onto the muddy slope. Each step sucked at her boots. The ground shifted under her weight. She kept low, one hand always on something solid. The rain hit her face so hard it stung like thrown sand. She moved along the edge of the rising water, angling toward the bluff. The path she had cut months ago, no more than a goat track scraped into the hillside, had already begun to wash out. She knew every turn of it, knew where the rock jutted and where the soil ran thin over shale. She moved by memory as much as sight. A branch slammed into her side and knocked the breath out of her. She stumbled, caught herself, and kept moving. Stopping meant losing heat. Losing heat meant slow hands, then no hands. But her rifle, Winchester, .44-40, hung across her back. The leather sling had soaked through and darkened. She felt the weight of it with each step, solid and familiar. 12 pounds with a full tube and the extra cartridges in her belt. She had carried it enough miles to know exactly how it would shift when she climbed, how it would catch if she turned too quick. Now it dragged at her shoulder, but she would not ditch it. Not here. Not with the woods full of things that moved quiet and watched from cover. She reached the base of the bluff and pressed herself against the rock. Water ran down the face in thin sheets, cold as the river. The falls roared above her, louder now, a steady pounding that filled her ears and chest. She edged along the narrow strip of ground, boots sliding on wet stone. The entrance was not a door. It never had been, and it was a gap behind the falling water, a space she had found by accident the first week she came here, when she was still thin from the road and raw from being turned out of her father's place with nothing but a blanket roll and a mule that would not last the month. She had watched the falls for a full day before she saw the dark behind it, the way the water broke around a lip of stone and left a hollow dry enough to stand in. She had crawled through that curtain with her teeth chattering and her lungs tight from the spray, and on the other side, she found a ledge wide enough for a man to lie down. That was enough. Enough to start. Now she stepped into that same water, let it hit her face and shoulders, and pushed through. The world changed in an instant. Outside was noise and force, while inside was dim light and the close smell of damp stone and smoke. The roar dulled to a thick, steady rush. Water traced the rock walls in thin lines. The ledge sloped back into the bluff, just as she had shaped it with pick and pry bar. The low roof forced her to duck. Her cabin crouched there, logs fitted tight, chinks packed with clay she had carried up in sacks. The fire pit sat cold, ash gray, no glow. She had banked it before dawn, thinking to keep coals for the day. The flood had come too fast. She stripped off her soaked shawl and wrung it hard, watching the water run onto the stone. Her fingers ached as blood pushed back into them. She flexed them, one by one, until they answered. "Get heat," she said, voice flat. She moved to the wood stack, split oak and hickory, cut short to fit the small space. Dry, stacked off the ground on a lattice she had built from green saplings. She took a handful of shavings from the tinderbox, felt for the flint and steel, and struck. The first spark died. The second caught. She bent low, cupped her hands, and blew steady until the ember took the shavings. A thin thread of smoke rose, sharp and clean. She fed it slivers, then thicker sticks. The flame grew, licked, then held. Warmth spread slow, not enough to chase the cold yet, but enough to promise it would. She set the iron pot on the stones and poured in what water she had left in the small keg. Not river water. She kept a separate store for drinking, collected from the seep that ran clear along the back wall. It came slow, drop by drop, but it did not carry the river's filth. She had learned to filter when she had to, cloth folded twice, red water poured through, then boiled hard until it rolled. Today she would not risk the river if she could help it. A crack sounded outside, closer this time. She froze, head turned toward the curtain of water. The sound came again, wood striking rock, then a short, sharp cry that cut through the roar. Not an animal, a boy's voice, thin, strained, carried wrong by the water. Della stood in one motion, grabbed the rifle, and moved toward the falls. The air near the entrance was colder, filled with spray. She stepped into it and pushed through. The river had climbed higher. It ran hard against the base of the bluff now, eating at the soil. Debris spun in tight circles where the current struck the rock. And there, caught on a snag of branches just below the path, something moved. A small shape, clinging, one arm wrapped around a limb, the other flailing for purchase. "Hold!" she shouted, though the water would swallow the word. The boy's head jerked up. Mud streaked his face. His hat was gone. He could not have been more than 14. Casper. The name hit her like the cold had. She had not seen him in a year, not since she walked away from the farm and the man who called himself their father. He slipped. The branch dipped. The current pulled. Della did not think. She slung the rifle back, dropped to her stomach on the slick rock, and reached down toward him, arm extended as far as it would go. "Take it!" she barked. He lunged. His fingers struck her wrist, slid, then caught. The grip was weak. He was half gone already, body dragged sideways by the force of the water. "Hold, damn you," she said again. And this time, it was for both of them. Yet she braced her boots against a crack in the rock, felt it bite into the soles, and pulled. The river answered by rising another inch. The pull came in jerks, not a smooth haul. The river did not give anything clean. It yanked Casper down, then slackened just enough for Della to gain a hand's width. His grip slipped twice. Each time she felt his fingers peel from her wrist, then clamp back with less strength than before. "Lock your arm," she shouted. "Around mine. Don't grab. Hook." He tried. The water slammed his shoulder into the branch. He cried out, choked it off, and forced his forearm across hers. She twisted her wrist, caught the back of his elbow, and cinched it tight. Bone on bone. It would bruise deep. It would hold. Her boots skidded. The crack she had wedged into filled with grit. She kicked once, hard, found a deeper notch, and set her heel. The muscles in her back pulled like rope under strain. She leaned away from the edge, using her weight, not just her arms. "Kick," she said. "Find the rock with your feet." He swallowed River, coughed. "I can't. You can. Down and right. Feel for it." He kicked blind, missed, kicked again. His boot struck stone, slid, then it caught on a lip. The angle changed. The current took less of him. Della pulled in one hard motion and got his shoulder over the edge. The branch snapped free and spun away. The river grabbed for him again, but she already had his coat bunched in her fist. She dragged him up onto the slick rock, inch by inch, until his chest cleared and his hips followed. They rolled together, away from the drop, and lay flat with the spray hitting their faces. For a few seconds, neither moved, and the roar filled the space where thought should be. Della pushed up first. "On your knees," she said, not gentle. "Don't lie there. You'll go cold." Casper coughed water and mud, then forced himself up. He was shaking so hard his teeth clicked. His clothes clung to him, heavy with River. One sleeve hung torn. His hands were scraped raw. "What are you doing here?" she said, already pulling him toward the falls. This was not the place for questions, but the words came anyway, sharp as flint. He did not answer. He kept his eyes on the ground, on his own boots, as if they might run off without him. "Move," she said, and shoved him into the sheet of water. He gasped when it hit him. It drove the breath out of him again, but there was no way around it. They pushed through together, blind for a second, and then stepped into the dim behind the curtain. The difference hit him like a wall. The noise dropped. The air changed. He blinked, trying to understand where he was. "Inside," she said. "Stay there." She moved fast, rifle against the wall, hands on his coat, stripping it off before he could argue. The fabric peeled away with a wet sound. She took his shirt next, then his boots, working the laces with numb fingers that did not want to obey. His socks came last, wrung hard and set near the fire. He stood in his long drawers, shivering, arms crossed tight over his chest. "Sit," she said, and pushed him down on the low bench she had built from a split log. "Hands out." He obeyed without looking at her. His eyes tracked the fire instead, small and mean, but alive. Della fed it, building it higher, careful not to choke it. Dry wood first, and then thicker pieces. Flame took, climbed, steadied. She grabbed a wool blanket from the peg on the wall and wrapped it around his shoulders, tucking it close at the sides to trap what heat there was. "Hold it tight," she said. "Don't let the air in." He nodded once. His lips had gone pale. Della turned to the pot. The water had begun to tremble, small bubbles forming along the bottom. Not enough. She crouched and blew at the base of the fire, driving heat up. The flames sharpened, licked the iron. The water rolled into a boil. She took a strip of cloth, dipped it, wrung it, and pressed it into his hands. "Warm your fingers first, not your face. Fingers." He did as told, hissing at the heat, then holding it anyway. Only then did she look at him proper. His face had changed in a year, thinner, angles where there had been roundness. A bruise darkened one cheekbone. His eyes looked older than the rest of him, set deeper, watchful in a way she did not like. "You ran," she said. He kept his gaze on the cloth in his hands. "I left." "Same thing." He shook his head, a small motion. "No." The word carried more than he said. Della did not press it. Not yet. She moved to the back wall, where the seep ran. Clear water beaded on the stone and gathered in a shallow groove she had cut with chisel and hammer. It trickled into a small basin lined with flat rock. Slow, steady, clean enough to trust if boiled. She filled a tin cup and set it near the fire, then took another strip of cloth and folded it twice. She poured a little of the boiled water through it into a second cup, catching any ash or grit. Habit. The neckerchief method had kept her alive more than once on the road. Right behind her, Casper shifted. The blanket slipped. She pulled it back into place with a firm hand. "Keep it," she said. "You lose heat faster than you make it." He nodded again, then finally looked at her. "I didn't know where else to go." "Why here?" she said. "You didn't know I was here." He hesitated. His fingers tightened on the cloth until his knuckles showed white. "Old Mr. Klein said you went south. Said you were living near water. Said you'd built something." Della snorted once. Klein talked too much. Always had. "Near water covers half this country," she said. "I followed the river," Casper said. "Walked the banks. Asked at 2 places. A ferryman downriver said there was a fall up this way. Said he'd seen smoke once. I came up yesterday. Slept under a rock. Then the rain." He swallowed. "I thought I could cross at the bend. And it was low this morning." Della pictured the bend. Shallow in dry weather. Stones laid bare like a path. In a rise like this, it would turn to a throat of fast water with no footing. "You thought wrong," she said. "I know." The fire cracked. Resin in the wood popped, sending a spark up that died against the damp rock above. The sound outside shifted, deeper now, as if the river had found a new path and taken it. Della moved back to the entrance and pushed through the curtain again. The light had gone gray. Rain still fell, hard and steady. The river had climbed another hand's width. It licked at the base of the bluff, tearing at the soil. A section of bank upstream slumped and slid, dumping a load of earth into the current that churned and vanished. She traced the line with her eyes, measuring without thinking. That if it kept rising at this rate, the lower path would be gone within the hour. The ledge behind the falls would hold longer. The rock was sound. The danger was not the water breaking in from the front. It was the slope above turning to mud and letting go. She stepped back inside and shook the water from her hair. "We're not leaving," she said. "Not now. We ride it out here." Casper's gaze flicked to the entrance, then back to her. "It'll come in?" "Not through there," she said, jerking her chin toward the falls. "That's a wall. It breaks the force. But the ground above can slip. If it does, we get buried, not drowned." He went still at that. Della crouched and took a stick from the woodpile. She drew a quick line in the damp ash on the floor. "This is us. This is the face of the bluff." She marked a second line above. "Well, this is the slope. Water soaks it, turns it to paste. If it moves, it comes down in chunks. We listen for cracks. We watch the drip. If the seep runs thick with mud instead of clear, we move back as far as we can and brace." "With what?" he asked. "With what we've got," she said. "Logs. That beam there." She pointed to a thick crosspiece she had set when she built the roof, wedged tight into the rock. It takes load if it has to. He nodded, eyes on the drawing, trying to fix it in his head. Della handed him the cup of hot water. Sip. Slow. Don't gulp. You'll cramp. He obeyed. Color began to creep back into his face, faint but real. She took her own cup and drank, then set it aside and checked the rest of their stores. A sack of cornmeal, tied tight. A strip of smoked venison hanging from a peg, hard and dark, but good. And a small tin of salt. Enough for days if they were careful. Her hand rested on the rifle for a moment. 12 rounds in the tube, more on her belt. Not much use against water, but it steadied her to feel it there. Outside, another crack split the air. Closer than before. The sound ran through the rock under her feet. Casper flinched. What was that? Bank, she said. Or a tree going. He swallowed. You think it'll stop? Della listened. The rain, the rush, the deeper grind of the river working at the land. She thought of the bend, of the ferryman's post, of the miles of water feeding this rise. No, she said. Not yet. She stood and moved to the entrance again. Not out of habit now, but because she needed to see it, to measure the climb, yet to fix in her mind how much time they had left before the river decided to take another piece of ground. The water had risen enough to cover the rock where she had lain to reach him. There would be no second chance at that edge. The seep changed first. Della saw it in the thin line along the back wall. The clear beads turned cloudy, then ran brown for a few heartbeats before clearing again. Not steady yet. A warning, not the blow. She set her cup down and stood. Up, she said. Blanket on your shoulders. Keep your boots close. Casper moved without argument. He had learned the pace of her voice. When it went flat like that, he did not waste time asking. Della crossed to the beam she had set into the rock when she built the roof. It was oak, cut green then, cured now to a hard, stubborn piece. Yet she had wedged it into 2 shallow sockets she had carved by hand, driving it tight with a maul until it sang under the strikes. It had held through wind and winter. Today, it would take weight it was not meant to take. She dragged a second log into place beneath it, angled as a brace. The ends did not fit clean. She kicked the lower end until it bit into a notch in the stone, then shoved the top tight under the beam. The wood creaked. Good. Better a creak now than a snap later. Bring those, she said, nodding at 2 shorter lengths near the wall. Casper hauled them, arms still shaking but steadier than before. Together they wedged them into the sides, building a crude frame that pushed back against the slope above. Not a wall, not even close. But it would spread the force if the mud came down in chunks instead of a single slide. At the seep ran brown again, longer this time. Della wiped her hands on her skirt and moved to the entrance. She pushed through the falling water and stepped out onto the narrow strip of rock. The river had climbed to meet her. It lapped at the base of the bluff and surged up in bursts, slapping the stone hard enough to send spray into her face. The path she had cut was gone. The oak root where she had braced to pull Casper lay under churning water, only a dark shape now and then when the current dipped. Upstream, a section of bank slumped. It did not fall clean. It sagged, held for a second, then tore loose and slid, carrying brush and a thin tree with it. The tree tipped, struck the water, and vanished in the brown rush. She measured the height against a mark in the rock she had chipped months ago, a habit she had learned on the road. The river had climbed nearly 3 feet since she first grabbed the root. It was not slowing. Della stepped back through the curtain and into the dim. The sound wrapped around her again, thick and constant. "We move back," she said. "Now." Casper gathered the blanket tight and followed her to the rear of the ledge. There was not much room. The rock sloped up and in, narrowing the space until they had to duck. Della had cleared it as far as she could when she first took the place, hacking away at soft spots, prying loose what she could carry. It gave them a few more feet. It would have to be enough. She took the rope from its peg. It was not long, 20 feet, hemp, worn but sound. She looped it around the beam twice and tied a half hitch she could pull free with one hand. The other end she wrapped around her waist and knotted low, and just above her hips. Casper watched her hands. "What's that for?" "If it comes down," she said, jerking her chin toward the slope. "And the floor goes. This keeps me from going out through the front. You stay behind the beam. You keep the blanket over your head if the dirt falls. Breathe through it. It'll catch some of the dust. And you?" "I pull," she said, "on anything that moves. On you if I have to." He swallowed and nodded. His eyes had that look again, older than they should be. The seep ran brown a third time. This time it did not clear. A low sound came through the rock, not sharp like a crack, but a long, dragging groan that set Della's teeth on edge. She had heard it once before, miles west of here, when a rain-swollen hillside had given way and taken a with it. The sound of roots tearing out of wet ground. "Down," she said, and pushed Casper behind the braced beam. The first clod hit the roof like a thrown sack. Then another. Then a scatter of smaller pieces, rattling across the logs and sliding off. The beam took the weight and held. Dirt sifted through the seams, fine and dry despite the rain, filling the air with a choking dust that smelled of old leaves and wet stone. Casper pulled the blanket over his head and mouth, just as she had told him. Della crouched beside the beam, one hand on it, feeling for any shift. The wood shuddered once, then steadied. "Stay," she said. Another impact. Heavier. The roof bowed a finger's width, then stopped. The side braces creaked, fibers grinding. One end slipped a hair, then caught again in the notch she had kicked into the rock. The groan outside deepened, then cut off in a wet, sliding rush, and a chunk of the slope had come down. Not all of it. Not yet. Della counted her breaths. In through the nose, out through the mouth, slow and even. Panic burned oxygen. Oxygen was what kept hands steady. The dust thickened. It coated her tongue. She pulled the edge of her own shawl up over her mouth and nose and breathed through it. "Talk to me," she said, not looking at Casper. "Keep your head." "I'm here," he said, voice muffled under the wool. He coughed. "I'm here." "Good." Another small slide rattled across the roof, then nothing. The groan did not return. The beam held. The braces held. Time stretched. The roar of the falls filled the gaps between each heartbeat. Della eased her grip on the beam by a fraction and listened. The seep still ran brown, but slower now. The water at the entrance sounded the same, hard, steady, not climbing in that last minute, not dropping either. "Don't move yet," she said. "Let it settle." They waited. After a count she did not measure, only felt. The air began to clear. The dust thinned. The smell of wet earth gave way again to damp stone and smoke. Della reached up and pressed on the beam. It did not give. She leaned back on her heels and let out a breath she had not known she held. "Stay there," she said, and rose. She moved toward the entrance and pushed through the falling water again. The river still ran high, but the rise had slowed. The mark on the rock did not change while she watched. Debris still rushed past, but less of it now. The big pieces had already gone. What remained was smaller, lighter, less force behind it. Upstream, the scar on the bank showed where the slide had cut. Fresh earth, raw and pale against the darker soaked soil. It had taken a section, but the rest held for now. Della stepped back inside. "It's easing," she said. "Not over, but it's not climbing like it was." Casper lowered the blanket from his face. His hair stuck to his forehead. A line of dirt marked where the wool had pressed against his nose and cheeks. "You built this," he said, looking around at the beam, the braces, the low roof blackened with smoke. "You knew." "I guessed," she said. "Then I built for the worst I could think of." He nodded, slow. "I thought you just ran off." Della wiped her hands again, more from habit than need. "I did," she said. "Then I stopped running." He looked at her, something like shame in his eyes, but also something steadier. "I couldn't stay," he said. "Not after." He stopped. Swallowed. I couldn't." Della did not press. There would be time for that if they had it. She moved back to the fire and fed it, careful to keep it small under the low roof. Heat returned to the space, pushing back the damp. She set the pot to boil again, added a handful of cornmeal, stirred until it thickened. Simple, heavy food. It would put something back into both of them. Casper watched her hands. "I can help," he said. "You will," she said, "when you can stand without shaking." He gave a short, tight smile that did not reach his eyes. "I can stand." "Then stand," she said, and handed him the stick to stir. "Slow. Keep it from sticking." He took it, awkward at first, then finding a rhythm. Outside, the roar held steady, not louder, not closer. Della went once more to the entrance and checked the mark on the rock. But the water sat just below it now, not climbing past. She waited a full minute, eyes fixed on the line. It did not move. She stepped back and let the curtain of water fall between her and the river. Inside, the fire burned low and steady. The beam held. The braces held. The seep ran cloudy, but lighter than before. Casper stood over the pot, stirring as she had shown him, the blanket still wrapped around his shoulders. Della leaned her shoulder against the rock and watched him, not soft, not smiling, just measuring. The river had taken the path, the route, and half the bank. It had not taken the ledge. Not today.